My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Matthew Stranick, and I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia, on the traditional lands of Tk'emlúp de Secwépemc within Secwépemc-Ulu, the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwépemc people. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition. I honestly have to kind of stop now to think on which one it's at, because that's how kind of high we are up in the numbers. 19, according to the Internet tab, just sort of adjacent to me here. This is the Ed Non-Tech podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Matt Stranick, and with me, as always, is
Dr. Doug Reed. Nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, first of all, just to sort of take a moment to pause, because, you know, we've been at this for the better part of 6 months, in fact, more than 6 months, I think, from when we sort of started just kind of doing some trials with the format, with the WordPress and some early recordings and things. And to me, that's really been beneficial in lots of ways, which I'm sure, you know, we're going to talk to. But during the preparation for this episode, Doug kind of sort of followed up with me with some communication to the effect about maybe it's time, since we are sort of evolving as a format, you know, we're out on the major podcast sites, you know, we have our WordPress looking as I think as good as we want to. And I think our messaging and just the content of the shows has been really kind of evolving. That's kind of, you know, what Doug and I have, I think, can safely say we agreed. Am I misrepresenting you there at all, bud?
No, not yet. I'll jump in if you do.
Of course you will. So, of course you shall. I hope you do. My goodness. So in the interest of that, one of the things that we're sort of changing up this time, and this was mentioned in the last podcast episode, that, you know, in terms of our evolving approach to territorial acknowledgements, for instance, respecting the fact that, you know, we are in respective areas of First Nations, you know, I'm here in Secwépemc-Ulu, in the unceded traditional territory, and Doug is in the unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory, which to me, I feel a certain affinity for as a maritimer and somebody who lived in Mi'kmaq territory for the better part of 30 years. So what we're trying to do now is sort of convey acknowledgements through a recorded format. So we've sort of blended the ed tech and contemporized the format a little bit more, so that we actually have some really nice, slightly polished, you know, good acknowledgements at the beginning that, you know, you'll be able to listen to at the beginning of this episode, as well as all subsequent episodes, you know, just in the interest of, you know, starting out in the best way possible. Because, I mean, I have had the feeling before, both in this podcast and in other circumstances, where I sort of been fumbling around a bit with my acknowledgements. And I sort of, you know, on the one hand, it's sincere and it's an element of the sincerity there. But on the other hand, I feel like as somebody who likes to do things to a relatively high level, believe it or not, it is something that I think we can step up a bit. So I think, Doug, that's all I've got to say about it. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, bud? It was your kind of note.
Yeah, no, my fumbling was with the pronunciations.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to mangle pronunciations, because I would hate it if somebody mispronounced my name over and over and over again instead of learning how to do it. So,
yeah, a bit re-traumatizing, a bit recolonializing, if you want to there. Some microaggressions which people kind of let fly, you know, inadvertent or otherwise. So thanks for the opportunity to cause us to try and do better with this, dude. I appreciate it, man. You're muted, man. You got a dog? Was your dog barking?
Yeah, sorry, the dog wasn't barking, but just kept nuzzling at me, so he might as well be on my lap.
Yeah, youngins, dogs and youngins. I'm telling you what, that's okay, man. So why don't you tell us what this episode's about? The title, again, as ever, very compelling. We're going into a foray, which I think actually brings us back onto a number of tracks that we've talked about in the past. You may agree. I'll be interested to hear. The title of this episode that Doug came up with, Fun, Play, Technology, Students, and Learning. So what are we on about that, Doug?
So, for everybody that doesn't remember from last episode, I was on a holiday, and it was fantastic. It was so good. And I learned how to just relax and how to chill out. And I kind of knew how to do that, but mostly my chilling out and taking care of things is being really active. And this was the exact opposite. I was chilling out this time.
You did the all-inclusive foray to Cuba,
Yes.
did you not? I think we went over that last time.
The all-inclusive didn't leave the resort holiday.
Everybody should have that experience at least once in their life, if all
Yeah.
things were distributed equally, you know, like just, yeah, I haven't done it yet. You know, I've kind of close enough to almost be there, but I haven't actually booked the all-inclusive tickets in the warm spot and just, you know, laid there for days. But it's on the bucket list for sure.
Yeah. So when I thought about that, and then I listened to a podcast called The Happiness Lab, which
cool.
is so good. And
are you going to, sorry, dude, are you going to link to that in the notes for the show?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Because I'd be interested to have that for posterity, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And one of the episodes I just listened to, because when I go and walk these dogs for an hour a day, so I listen to a podcast on whatever. And it was about fun and people that research how adults have fun. And it was fascinating to find out that most adults can't figure it out. They can do it as kids, and then they just kind of forget. Life kind of happens, and they kind of forget how to have fun. But fun and play is so important with your learning. And so that's why I brought this up and thought, okay, this is a big deal. We need to talk about this, because fun matters.
First of all, that's awesome, and thank you. I agree on all levels, and in part just from kind of, you know, some notions that I've put up here and some scribble notes, which we can maybe get to a bit. I guess what I would just say is, you know, you've touched on a lot here, and I guess I sort of wonder, you know, if your background is a K-12 educator, or your spouse is a K-12 educator herself, correct?
Yeah, both.
So you're you kind of have a foot in that world all of the time, and yes. I kind of wondered how much that was sort of affecting, you know, what today's topic might be. As a dad to some kids in K-12, right? I mean, I have so much respect for K-12 educators and what they do and everything that goes on there. So again, if you could just humor me a bit with some insight there, bud.
Yeah, my recent forays into employment involved teaching in a K-12 system again, because I had to move my pension. That was a pension decision.
Yep. And
the amount of stuff that we had to do for paperwork reasons just disgusted me. And it's like, no, I want to do cool stuff. I want to do fun stuff. And I ended up setting my lessons up to be fun. And the students were going to have fun. They were going to interact, because I'm a constructionist.
One way or the other. And I like how you said constructionist versus constructivist. But anyway, that's for another time. Yeah. Okay.
So that all of that came out, and it just ticked me off when it was like, okay, do this test because we got to put a letter or a number next to that kid. I'm like, why? Nothing's going to get done with it. It's going to sit in a file folder.
I would debate that. I think it's part of the sort of shadow, the institutional shadow that follows every one of us around in computer systems and file folders, and have pretty determining characteristics on what, you know, we may be potentially capable of within our education and within our you know, professional lives. I think that there's actually a high level of insidious intent to some of that stuff, but maybe I'm just saying that as a dude who's been unemployed for a year. Anyway, dude, your point is well taken. Please go on.
No, maybe I'm just cynical. I could be cynical too.
I think I'm more cynical than you. I think you're cynical, and I think I'm nihilist about this. But anyway, please continue.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Nearly. Anyway.
Yeah, like the school system I was at, the reading expert person in the district did the reading tests wrong for ages and ages and ages.
Did them wrong as in designed or administered them wrong? Or the
scoring of how they had to be scored to go into the files. And everybody only found out when the next when that person retired, the next one came in and said, "Oh my God, what's been going on here?" So that's
Well,
why.
to that extent, one would hope that the affordances of mass uploading of document technology and capture can be, hopefully used to prevent such malfeasance in the future. That's
Yeah,
one thing. That's one thing we can hope. Positive digital futures, people. We're keeping it optimistic up in here. So why don't we go on here, dude? I mean, why don't we just jump in? You got O'Reilly
I
Tompkins
got
in
the
your email.
O'Reilly.
Okay, is that O'Reilly from the guy who quoted the term Web 2.0? Is that the same O'Reilly or no?
I do not think so.
Okay, never mind. That I don't even want to. I don't even believe my knowledge about that further enough to want to take it further. But if you had taken me up on it, it could have been a thing. But okay. So many
Yeah.
physical educators in Canadian Atlantic provinces are forced to cope with large classes, inadequate facilities and equipment, and reductions in scheduled time for physical education classes. And it should come, Doug. Thank you for that. I just read that for the first time. And speaking as we're both Atlantic Canadians, I mean, this translates to generational deterioration of public health outcomes. This is a very correlation because the Maritimes, you read, in the Globe and Mail or something like that every so often, like, Maritimes, sort of lead regions in, obesity or, heart disease or certain, and part of that is like the aging demographic within the Maritimes generally because of historical outmigration. But then the other part of it is too, it's things like this. I mean, it's just like, well, where do you cut costs? It's like anybody who thinks that phys ed should, I can't believe high school me. I'm sorry, dude. I'm throwing you under the bus. Anybody who thinks that that gym should be phys ed should just be an elective is just, not thinking reasonably, in my opinion. But anyway.
Well, but look at the other things that get cut.
Yes.
Right?
Music. My heart bleeds for music programs in Atlantic Canada, man.
And those are so important and so critical. And the students that sometimes do not thrive in the typical STEM academics program.
It gives them outlets for their personality and traits wherein they can be valued, not just, within a community context, right? It gives them a sense of self-efficacy. It's something they can feel confident about. And again, I don't mean to go too personal on my family stuff here, but my son made the decision. He's been sort of on it for a while, but the selection for high school curriculum now for next year is coming up. And it's sort of his first time just sitting down and picking his courses by himself, which, more power to you, Ethan, for doing that. But he also made the rounds to his counselor. He's just like, I think it would be better for my academics to switch out of French immersion, which he's been doing since kindergarten. And he gave, what I understand, the counselor some very good reasons for that. He gave me some very good reasons for that. He gave his mother some very good reasons for that. And I'm like, if you have enough presence to sort of advocate for yourself that well, then by all means, son, that's awesome. I don't really know why I'm hyping my son right now. I sort of lost my thread there a bit, dude. But
But it's all part and parcel with the concept of fun and play and learning and the technology component.
So my son thrives in physical education settings. Both of my kids do. And one of the kid is kind of struggling with attention and stuff a little bit in the class. The younger kid, I think it's fair to say, without being pejorative. But like, it's like, phew, I get the report card and whatnot. And it's like, okay, it's like, he's well behaved, he's respectful, he's awesome at phys ed. And then his other stuff is kind of, hit and miss. It's like, fine. He comes home and he's happy. He tells me that he's happy. He's got his friends. He's on the basketball team and he plays football. So, I mean, just to me, that's like a well-rounded experience, which so anyways, dude, sorry to just barge in and kind of ramble here.
No, not at all. This is perfect. This is where I was hoping we would head.
Okay.
Because most people don't play football or basketball if it's not fun.
Oh, I hated it. I ran for the hills from that stuff. And I ran to the smoking pit. I ran to the marijuana dealer. I ran to the, underage drinking purveyors at around my older son's age. He's turning into a very impressive young man. He doesn't need any of that stuff as near as I can tell. And all he knows is his old man has 2 podcasts, no job, and a pile of records that keeps growing. It's like, okay, by most measures of success, we're doing okay. And a lot of that is just like my kids, are plugged into things that I wasn't at all at their age. They're successful at it. They love it. They're thriving at it. And that keeps me motivated. It's like, oh, here's something. It's like, I was just finished the Lakers were in the midst of losing prior to the beginning of this podcast. And I've got high hopes for the Raptors. It's like, I never anticipated being this stereotype middle-aged man with my friggin' NBA scarves and, my punk rock, t-shirts and everything else. I got to say, kind of thanks for TRU and my marriage for kind of both ending at the same time to give me the agency to kind of tumble into this situation, whatever it is. Anyway, Doug, I think from me that I'm going to ramble today, maybe especially. So
that's fine.
I'll just be quiet, man, unless you kind of have some time here, dude.
No, please don't. One thing I liked about the O'Reilly article was the title. They ought to enjoy physical activity, struggling with fun and physical education. And it's
and that's where it's like smart curriculum becomes a thing. It's like, fine, keep it on the curriculum, but it's like, teach phys ed in ways that attract the kids who suck at phys ed. Like do sort of a multi-part, thing with your curriculum, individuated instruction if need be. I mean, I hear this from language teachers and, math teachers and stuff, sometimes. I mean, just even from my kids encountering this, it's like, we kind of got them doing some individual stuff. And, I get these emails from teachers from the K-12 system who are, I wonder with physical education if the same amount of flexibility is there. Because I just kind of had the monolithic experience, like, oh, well, here's some sport that you don't really care for and you're going to be bad at. And, or square dancing. God help me. Square dancing in school when you're just like in puberty, man, brutal. I mean, I found it. I was a socially awkward, weird man, at a very early age, right? So anyway, so that's what I'm saying. Flexible curriculum, not just, dismantling it to save money. That's the most asinine aspect of maritime public policy in general. Like, let's just tear it apart after some consultant charges us, $1.5 million to say that we should just do a reboot, because a new government's coming in. That's basically what's characterized, at least New Brunswick, social and educational initiatives over the decades. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Wow, so many tangents, dude. I'm sorry.
No, that's right now. I'm having fun, and we're talking about learning, and I'm learning new stuff. So I think this all fits into the category.
Well, I mean, to the people who think that I don't always prepare things much in advance, which is kind of true, I did. I sort of looked at the topic down here, and one of the things that sort of came to me as just kind of thinking about this is that very much, you've just alluded to, doing this podcast has in itself become an endeavor primarily, I think, of enjoyment, but it's not without a legitimate academic and professional function. I don't think. I mean, you're a man who's out there in the world with your name on an office door, and you're sort of committing to this stuff. And I really do have serious appreciation and respect for that. And I never want to talk about your specific job, and I don't ever intend to talk about mine if and when I ever get one into the details. But just the fact that I don't know, man, the public support of this stuff has meant a lot to me over the past bunch of months, man. And it's just so the enjoyment, and then for me it was like learning some new stuff about podcasting, learning some new stuff about WordPress, which I always get to enjoy when that happens. And for you, again, as you sort of said at the very beginning, like this is something that you had entertained as possibly doing for some time before I approached you about it. So I think the Venn diagram, the work or fun thing is kind of overlapping here a bit, dude.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I did that on purpose.
I know you did.
For me, the notes that I send out each week that you really nicely turn into something coherent on the webpage.
It's coherent anyway, but I just like throwing in the GIFs and all that stuff. I mean, I'm a nerd that way. But anyway,
No, that's, hey, we're the same type of nerd, so that
Yeah,
works
I think so.
well.
Similar anyway, for sure. Yeah.
But I like putting the lesson plan together. Like if we were teaching a class or if we were guest speakers, this is the kind of stuff I would organize and put into play. And then we talk about whatever we're going to talk about anyway.
So this is again where the methods that we've chosen to sort of carry this through. So we have the back channel communication vis-a-vis Facebook because we know each other that way, and then we both have enough rudimentary experience with Google Docs, and how that kind of stuff works, and yeah. So again, for me, it's like just when it becomes a matter of then rendering that into sort of the more media, final format, it's like, without what you provided, the skeleton isn't there. And I remember like when I first got into teaching whatsoever, like at a Hagwon in South Korea, Seoul, not that far from Gimpo Airport, if you want to know. And it was
better. Yeah, I don't know where any of those things are.
It was nice. But I was terrified. It was my first real experience with acute mental distress in a professional setting. First time I probably went into a real depression spiral. And one of the things that kind of got me out of it, and because again, triggered by a sense of lack of self-efficacy in my job, to the point that I felt that my job and therefore key relationships around me were in jeopardy. You see, this has been a thing at other points in my life, but one of the things that got me through it and sort of turned it into a successful experience, which turned it into then a arguably successful educational career thereafter, was the lesson plan. And that was just like my bullet list to myself. It's like, if I don't know what the hell is going down in this classroom, I can just kind of look at this and steer it back, or just the fact it's like, here it all is, start to finish. So again, I like your analogy here to these notes as a lesson plan of sorts. There. You're muted, dude.
Oh yeah. No, I just had to move the dog off my lap. So
gotcha. So man, so what do you make of all that? I mean, tell me what here. I'm talking too much. I'm talking way too much.
This gives the adult fun component to what we're talking about and making it so vital.
So
if this wasn't fun, yeah, it would be work.
So if I may, then, I mean, apart from the fact that we like each other and we got lots of similar characteristics and we, worked at the same job for a certain period of time and blah, blah, blah. I mean, so what about the experience of this constitutes, a fun aspect from an educational standpoint? Like all those other aspects are just kind of these effective factors. But what about, I guess what I would say is like, what are you learning from, if you had to say, I learned this, that, and the other from this experience thus far, I mean, just what would some of that look like? I'm curious.
Well, we're 19 episodes in?
We are.
I'm reading I'm presenting 3 to 4 articles that I've just read that I'm learning about. And there's other ones that I've read and it's like, I can't find anything in there that I want to really step off with and do stuff with. So every single podcast, I'm learning more about education.
So
and I like that.
Are you looking then to the viewpoint as in it's all good content, or you're looking at how some of these other, podcasts and things that you look at, how they sort of convey themselves? Because I'm always one where you like the content, you like the format, you like the interplay between the two. I mean, what's all the thought there?
Well, that's it. I like engaging with you every week because we have different ways of doing stuff and different ways of thinking about stuff. And I like that synergy, right? Because being a social constructionist, I got to talk to somebody. I got to bounce it off.
So, and again, like in terms of then a tactile constructionist or arguably constructivist approach, constructionist, we'll go with it, because constructionist does emphasize, I think, a little bit more the production of certain things, right?
Whereas learning artifact at the end.
That's it. It's kind of the distinguishing feature. Whereas constructivism doesn't necessarily, need that final step, right? It doesn't need the tangible artifacts. So, I mean, we just have such a myriad of tangible artifacts that go along with the show, even to the point where, like any episode, you could take it apart from, the Facebook message to the doc to, what then this recording turns into, the audio, and then friggin' all my production processes, which is very straightforward. But I mean, it's all tangible things in and of themselves, leading to, ostensibly this kind of meta artifact, if you will,
Yeah.
which is to say a single podcast episode or whatever. So,
and there's a bunch of other funds for me. Is
okay.
I have digital clutter, right? I'm a digital pack rat.
Yeah.
If there was like Digital Pack Rats Anonymous, right? I'd be saying, hello, I'm Doug and I'm a pack rat.
I feel like there's an HBO show about that, hoarders and then this kind of thing, or anyway.
But I get to go look now. I get to go through my files and reminisce about, oh, I remember when I grabbed that. Oh yeah, I think this would be good. And it's fun for me to go back and say, hey, look, I can finally use this thing that was random way back when.
It's curating it's more of a curated thing than perhaps an ill-defined mass of files and JPEGs and such, right? Yeah.
And sometimes when we're interacting,
yep,
you take a turn down a direction, and I'm like, okay, where are we going?
My entire life is made of left turns, man. Like I'm just like, anybody who wants to follow my path, I'm just like, don't. Just, it will not end well.
But it's fun for me because I go in straight lines until
I envy the crap out of that natural tendency. The people who are just like, who just since childhood, just like, basic, it's like, I know people have trauma. I know, things are never that complicated, but some people just like, God bless my friends who are still hanging out in Fredericton, from when they lived there the whole time. It's just like, man, the linearity of that is friggin' phenomenal to me. It was not in my DNA in any way, but, I admire that. So maybe chaos is something that I could, my personal chaos is something I could try and unlearn a little bit more as I grow older. I wouldn't be overly optimistic on that regard because it wouldn't be a very sincere effort, but nevertheless, it's
another fun thing for me
Yep.
about the technology and learning and stuff is the next article. The Varen, Keena, Harrington, Peterson, and Monti article. Computers in Play in Early Childhood, Affordances and Limitations. I love this article because I know the 4 authors from Australia.
Oh.
And Irina
Yep.
is such a kind, wonderful person, and I'm disappointed I never got to publish with her. Jan Harrington, if you ever want to meet an amazing human being, she would be in my top 5 of all time amazing people.
Awesome.
And she publishes so much, and she's so good. She's the one that one day we were working on a paper together, and she handed it to me, said, here, make some edits, let's make this better. And I'm like, I can't make this better, right? You're like 10 times the academic and writer I am. I can't make it better than what you've written. Like, everything is so beautiful.
So I mean, not to barge in here, dude, but speaking of mentorship, which is what I think you're getting at here, I've had some very infrequent but very valuable experiences being in that close proximity in a professional setting to someone whose work that you absolutely totally admire. And yeah, man, what you've described is not something to be taken lightly. That's an awesome reason to have that in this list, dude.
Yeah.
Personal connections are not to be taken for granted. Is there anything else you wanted to add on this one? Because your next one just jumps at me. But
this is about how people are misusing the technology. The assumption is, oh, the kids like video games. Here, go get them to play a video game. They'll learn. And it's like, no, most video games aren't set up for that. like if you remember the video games from your youth, you mentioned them a couple of podcasts ago, that those were video games that you learned stuff from. Like you had Sim Earth.
Oh yeah. No, I know I did time. I'll tell you though, since we're gonna talk full on about the video games. I mean, like when Nintendo, I'm of the generation. I was like, again, kind of lower middle class ish for most of my time growing up. So when like we got the Nintendo, the original Nintendo, like 2 years after most people did, and when it landed in our house, it's just like, man, right? And I had similar recollections. It's funny, when I think back on it, how many formative experiences of my younger years were to do with technology when I consider, whatever I've mutated into over the past 10 years or so within my career. But, for me, it was like, getting the tape recorder with the thing where you could tape record yourself. We got the Tandy computer, this big boxy thing with the dot matrix computer, and you had to boot DOS, from scratch with the thing, right? And that was where I was teaching myself to write stories, right? Like I'd get on it, figure out how to use the word processing program, and then I would just write these most inane, ridiculous, but fun for me stories at my little grade 5 or grade 6 level or whatever. And sometimes I'd churn them out and take them around to the class. And a lot of people, probably thought it was annoying and awful, and probably it was annoying and awful. But there were some times where it's just like, when some of my kids in my own grade were just like, hey man, that's kind of cool, weird but cool, always weird but cool. I was like, man. So this is sort of an instance where, early on, and I'm probably just thinking of this now just because, of the nature of the topic. Yeah, I mean, again, you may have had similar experiences, dude, with technology, as a younger person. I mean, what was it like for you?
Yeah, it was. We had a computer early, but
Okay.
the user interface wasn't there yet.
Okay.
Like we had a Commodore PET.
Oh, Commodore. That means old, like really old, right? That's the only kind of.
Yeah.
Commodore 64. So that's before Commodore 64 or after?
And before the VIC-20 and before the teacher's PET. It was the Commodore PET. It was, I don't know, there was numbers behind it. It was like 4040 or 8080 or some, I don't remember that part, but we had that in the house. We weren't scared of it. The first time I ever used it to like print anything off was grade 11. Had to write a history paper, and I thought, oh, this will be cool. This will be great, and then printed it off on that dot matrix printer with the little tabs.
Yeah. It's like, and if it ripped, it was a pain in the, like before it was supposed to. It was kind of a pain in the ass, Yeah.
So we had like a VIC-20 appeared at our house.
Okay.
And a Commodore 64 appeared because my mom borrowed one from the school she was teaching at for a weekend, one of those kind of things.
Yeah.
But the whole concept of playing and learning isn't always there with the developers. Sometimes developers are just creating a game. And if the kids have more of a chance to play, and like traditional play with exploring and being silly and wandering around and not always having to be on a quest or whatever the game happens to be, there's more learning opportunities there.
So if I can just give a shout out to the friggin' Minecraft series of games. I mean, that is really for like two-dimensional renderings that are just being manipulated, second by microsecond by microsecond. Both my kids spent time with Minecraft. That was sort of their entry point into whatever they're into now. And when I was looking at that, it was like, this is actually valid on a bunch of ways, so the open world concept, creative mode as opposed to, adversary mode or whatever the other one is.
Yeah.
So just lots of really awesome potential. I mean, my other significant experience with video games was about 6 months when I was 19 years old, living in Halifax in an apartment with almost no furniture, but we had the TV and the turntable and whatever. And somebody brought over Super Nintendo and like GoldenEye, James Bond 007, and that was like you were like it was the first game where, like, at least that I'd experienced, where you had like the 4 screens and you're actively hunting because you have like 3 your friends with you, and you're like, you're hitting the joints, and it's like you're developing some cognitive routines there, right? Cognitive routines. So to the extent that involves synapses, creating new pathways, I mean, is that what learning is to a degree, or no? I mean,
And the research shows that it happens quicker when people play.
so for my son, my older son, Ethan, right? He's been really into basketball. He's had, pretty good success with it. Their season just ended past couple days ago, valiantly. And but one of the things is like I'm down here watching NBA. I'm just like, because I'm an older dude, right? And this is kind of that box there is what I grew up with. My son, who's an awesome player, he never almost comes down here to watch it with me. Sometimes just kind of if he's in the room, but like most of the time he's playing NBA 2K 2-3 or whatever, like relentlessly. And he can tell me things about players from, what I'm watching from this year's version of that video game. So it's really interesting to me that these kids, coming up now, turning into their teen years at least, and probably, older, their whole sense of narrative has, fundamentally different because it's got this interactivity to it that's been built through these, games that they're into, and such that, as you say, right, without an instructional thought, they're trying to generate money for their shareholders first and foremost. So that was a long ramble there, dude. Long ramble.
No, but that goes right into the Siegel 2015 article.
Awesome.
Technology learning can be fun in games, and it talked about how not all video games are academically effective, and people don't even have. We have another naming problem. We don't have a common agreement on what the definition of video game is. So if we don't have a common definition of that, how can we have a common definition of educational video game or a video game that involves free play? Right? It's not there because the people that are making the money are making the money, and that's fine. And the people that are trying to do the teaching and learning, they don't have the money. So
I guess what I would sort of say, you've kind of given that's awesome. Thank you. When I was sort of making my little notes here, one thing that did cross my mind is if we're talking about, play, I mean, first of all, video games, yes. But part of it sort of occurred to, are there connotations there associated with, for instance, simulation-driven learning, such as, happens with nursing? I'm thinking of those nursing dummies, in the faculty of health science, or, simulation to the extent that, like, for instance, in military or, law enforcement or first responder kind of training. I mean, from what I understand, because I've never actually worked on those projects at all, but I mean, there are some pretty high level immersive training environments, whether through simulation, physical, simulation, or artificial, kind of environments. Again, I sort of wonder there at the sort of overlap between some of these things, right? So, learning as play, learning as simulation, immersive technology, and or other kinds of pedagogical or andragogical approaches. Do you know what I mean, bud?
Do people get to play? Like seriously, like if you're doing a nursing simulation or a flight simulation or whatever, how much playing do you get to do?
Free agency to do whatever. Yes. Open world simulation.
Yeah. I flew that Microsoft flight simulator years and years ago, and I crashed all the time, and who cared? And I'm never going to fly an airplane, right? Being mostly colorblind kind of puts an end to that, and I don't have the cash to start. But
never say never on that last one, friend. But anyway,
it'd be great if I win the lotto, maybe, but it's not high on my priority list to explore.
I think we're going to write a best-selling book about this experience, bud. I think it's just a matter of when. But anyway.
Cool. Okay. But with the simulations, like SimCity and Sim Earth and Sim Village, there was a lot of creative. It was simulated, but there was a lot of play aspects to that and explorations and the self-efficacy. Does that exist in, like, if you're in second year nursing and you're in that simulator, right? You're scheduled for this time to that time, and it costs a pile of money to run the simulator.
Yeah.
It's
well, fair enough. So then dialing it back then, to speak to the notion of play as we're sort of positioning it here, open world, open choices within a sort of much wider, contained learning environment of sorts, but whether that's defined by a technology boundary or some other kind of boundary is sort of something else. But the main thing being that the choices are there, to be made by the individual and or groups of individuals, and without any kind of consequence of error. Or what do you sort of see there about that?
I think that when the programmers sit down to do it, whoever the software designers are, what they have to know is about the richness of play. Because I was
just thinking richness. Yes.
Do you ever go into SimCity, or not SimCity? Sorry, Second Life.
I think that is such a comical endeavor. I know where you're getting at, and I respect your point, but I just have nothing but laughs for But
when I was at NATE, that was all the rage. Let's do a bunch of life stuff.
Brutal Second Life. I mean, it's great. It launched. Listen, a whole lot of papers got made about it, a whole lot of presentations, whole lot of valuable knowledge about teaching and learning in virtual environments very early on. I mean, I know that there were for sure predecessors to that, but I mean, that's kind of the one that pricked up my ears, when I was first thinking about this field as something to be involved in. When I first got into the ed tech doctorate at U Calgary, a colleague that I actually became quite friends with, Dr. Kathleen Bradshaw at Algonquin College in Ottawa, she had done a bunch of stuff with Second Life, and the way she described it made it sound really cool. So I'm not like poo-pooing it as such. I'm just saying every time I had to use it, it crashed because of my inadequate bandwidth, or finally I'd get into it and then dudes would be running up to me and swearing or trying to hump you and weird shit like that. And I'm just like, man, this was not what was promised. So sorry, a bit of a tangent there, dude.
No, but what was the problem? You engaged with it the same way I did it. Luckily they bought their own island, so we could just go there and blacklist people.
Nate Island, I love it. Anyway,
literally it was Nate Island, but that was just designed to be an open world without any learning or playing designed into it. And a lot of people brought that to it later, but it was all these little islands. You would buy your little island and you do whatever, and you'd let whomever in, but how would you know where to go? So it wasn't just everything being open and open worlds and all that. There had to be that pedagogical play component that wasn't there.
Well, and some would argue just the fact that it's positioned within a medium itself is a level of engagement, right? In as much as, I've sort of decried, the so-called subroutines that you have to kind of get through in order to use an LMS properly. But honestly, I mean, that's kind of the, any media format has its own social norms. And in as much as education is fundamentally a social process, then it makes sense, what you're describing within its own context in a virtual environment makes its own kind of sense as per the affordances and constraints of the format, right? So this is good stuff, man. So what else do we have here?
The last article is the Lucardi article, the impact of fun and enjoyment on adults.
That is not. You have a Chomsky quote here, dude. But
I have that at the bottom, but that's not really an article.
Pardon me. I love Noam Chomsky. Love Noam Chomsky. I'm jumping.
Yeah, we're on the same page. That's why I saved it all those years ago.
Sorry, dude. Lucardi, please.
Yeah, no. It comes back to, this isn't just for children. This isn't just pedagogy. There's also andragogy involved, because adults like to learn and have fun at the same time too.
Well, it's
basically, I'm summarizing this tremendously, but
it's a necessary part of ongoing, cognitive health, man. Like
Yeah.
you're like it's like people with their needlework as they grow to an advanced age, or people who just kind of do the crossword puzzler all the time, or whatever, who get really good at that. I mean, again, it's just like finding something that is constant, and with some amount of regularity, but that sort of keeps the parts flowing. The parts flowing. What a wretched metaphor. You know what I'm getting at, bud? I mean,
I really don't know what parts you're talking about, but
the cognitive parts, the neurons and such, man. I've had a lot. I still consider this, for me, the end of a very, very long week, dude. But so thanks for humoring me.
That's fine. But if we take a look,
yeah,
with the teaching and learning that's happening, like, it's because now we finally talked about adults.
Yeah.
How many university courses were fun? How many university courses involved interacting with others and humor and like low risk achievements and actually being able to have emotions?
So I benefited. I think you benefited too from going to a smaller undergraduate institution, did you not?
Yeah, I did.
So my first undergraduate, St. Thomas, my second undergraduate too, St. Thomas University in Fredericton. So sometimes what I will say is, like, you're right. The pedagogy, just from my memory of it, it's like there were a lot of didactic teaching methods, but there were some who made that amazing and rich.
Yep.
Stuart Donovan, Irish literature, St. Thomas University. I think he's still there. Like, when he got you to called up on you to read like just some passage from Ulysses or whatever, and you were just, it wasn't much, but it was a hell of a trick. Like you were like, oh, it's, and he could tell if you weren't keeping up on the reading, so that was a guy who used didactic methods to amazing effect. He just did one thing that was interactive. He'd just kind of pan around the room. It's like, you read this next bit. And it was friggin' amazing. So anyway, not to like totally, condone or equivocate for one way or the other. I know. So.
But take a look. He did that one twist,
yep.
and that was enough for it to be amazing.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I'm assuming there's more than that, right? I'm assuming he.
On it, he's like a top level scholar in his area, and he did not care about he said what was on his mind. It was always very informed. It was always very thoughtful, and he helped publish the he still does publish the university literary publication. So behind all of that stature, he stood into the classroom, and you knew what he was about when you signed up for his class. Yeah. And for those of us who were into it, it was friggin' awesome. And others who were just kind of there like, whatever. But again, I was there. I was ready to hear it, which I know isn't always the case for people. So.
Yeah. So that worked for you, right? All those pieces came together and it was awesome.
Yeah. The pieces floated together cognitively. There we go.
Yeah. Almost like magic, like it wasn't planned or designed that way. Yeah.
Serendipitous-ish. So tell me about the Chomsky here, man. Not that I ever need an excuse to hear about Chomsky, but tell me about it.
I'm going to read this out.
Please do.
I don't, because sometimes my reading voice just gets a little monotone. But the whole educational professional training system is a very elaborate filter, which just weeds out people who are too independent and who think for themselves and who don't know how to be submissive and so on, because they're dysfunctional to the institutions. And that has been my life, right? I have to fight so many times, and I just love where Chomsky's coming from with this.
I'm happy that you said what you just said, because then I don't have to say anything except that I may possibly, maybe know what you mean here, dude. So
yeah, like there's a level of submissiveness and butt kissing that has to happen to survive.
Well, okay, so like I think we're kind of winding down here, dude, except for the illustrations. Do you have illustrations
Yeah.
in this one? You do. Okay,
I don't
but
know.
just so then we're winding down. We can do maybe a little bit more. Like my grandparents, one of whom is still alive. My nunny and my granddad. My granddad John just passed away last year. Roughly about a month. Coming up. Rest his soul. But nunny, I remember my dear sweet Irish grandmother. When I was like, she's from Ireland, right? And when I was sort of making the turn into graduate study, she's just like, well, Matthew, that's wonderful, but we never thought of you as an academic person. I'm like, me neither, nunny. And yet here I am, because it's just like by process of elimination and some other things in my life. This is, if you really want to get picky about it, you can sort of blame Mounier, my kid's mom, because if it wasn't for her, the whole notion of being even an educator is possibly up in the air. So it's these personal connections, I think, that we, it's nice to acknowledge and pay respect to them sometimes, right? So,
Now,
anyways,
if you
dude.
look at the Chomsky article related to what we've just talked about,
Okay.
with play and fun and stuff,
Yeah.
part of the people that think differently and independently, they are fun because they engage from another angle. They're coming, and a lot of times to survive, it's be quiet, put your head down, just work, and do it the exact same way as everybody else.
It's speaking as somebody who has like a significant part of their identity rooted in indie culture and punk rock and alternative music. Like this is like it's cool to be on the outside of the thing. That's been kind of my rallying cry since a very young age. And I've somehow managed to parlay that into, some limited success as an educator, which I'm hoping is still going to continue in some fashion. I mean, it will, but just how it manifests, right?
Yeah.
So, dude, I think we've been doing really well. Are you, how are you feeling about the episode so far, man? You feel like we kind of hitting what we want to here?
I didn't expect it to go this way, but I'm loving it.
Okay.
Which is what I like with most of our episodes. I don't know where we're going, but it's good when we get there.
Well, and hence the improvised and extemporaneous nature of the podcast. You're kind of it's kind of however much you prepare, and in any educational setting. I mean, no matter how much you prepare, there's always that uncertainty, which is what keeps it exciting, quite frankly.
It's what I told when I used to teach undergraduate education students.
Yep.
I said, those teaching moments, you cannot plan them, right? When those moments just happen in a class.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, should we go back to lesson plan? And I'm like, no, never. Right? Always run with the learning that's happened when people are engaged and interested. Go in that direction, because then learning's happening and it's good.
And so this is where we can recommend a visit to your local teaching and learning center, because if you are unclear about how to harness that enthusiasm, suppose you're in that moment, suppose you haven't had pedagogical training or as such, but you're in that moment and you can tell that the excitement is there, and you may find yourself, Doug is experienced. Doug, has this stuff. He, has enough confidence and self-efficacy to kind of be willing to ride that moment to see where it needs to go. Whereas maybe somebody without the pedagogical training or, without the self-efficacy, maybe junior or whatever within their career, you're not sure how to engage with that motivation effectively. Certainly, it's something that I've valued whenever it happens to me. And I'll again say, your teaching and learning center, if you're at a university or college, or whoever functions within that role for you, will be able to help you bridge that gap, with whether it's a teaching strategy or, just they'll give you some very practical things. I like, since we're really winding down, Doug has graciously shared with me sort of the planning document for where he thinks we might want to go. For the next.
Before you do that, though,
yes, dude.
I'm going to tell you how disappointed I am that you don't have a driver's license. So that means you don't have a car. So that means you don't have a bumper sticker that says, I heart teaching and learning centers.
I buy T-shirts, man, and that's my bumper sticker. And actually, I get tattoos, up the wazoo. I've got my next 4 tattoos planned out,
Oh, cool.
but I'm not going to get them until I have a job. I'm not allowed to do anything. I'm not allowed to do anything really that's fun until I have a job, besides buy records.
Like,
But
well, that's why you're running a consulting company, right?
and you're not the only one who's disappointed in my life that I don't have a driver's license, man.
Yeah, sorry, I just
No, man, it's just like everybody around is just like, so Mounier finally, she was just like, you're really not going to get one, are you? And I'm just like, honestly, Ethan will be driving in 3 years, and I'm going to pay him a rich stipend to just take me where I need to go. So, I mean, that's what he's learning, and this is me enjoying the success of my children who are turning into adults, I think. So.
So for the website, then we need some kind of bumper sticker image that says "I Heart Teaching and Learning Center."
Okay, man, that we could do that with H5P. We could do the hell out of that with H5P. Okay. Really, the last thing.
Okay. Yes.
I think one. So Doug provided this awesome planning document with all these awesome topics about where we could possibly go, and I can't find a single wrong thing about any of it. What I do hope, as we're sort of maturing, is that we always kind of talk a little bit, I think, in the abstract, maybe about the teaching strategy stuff. And I think at this point, we've sort of built up our vernacular, built up our concepts where, as per Doug's plan, and I support this, we're going to maybe kind of start doubling back on some of the things that we've talked about in the past. And I think ultimately we're going to get more granular, and perhaps, we may even have a series of episodes which are perhaps explicitly to do with teaching strategies, or specifically to do with certain, technology platforms and whatnot. That's one thing I love about this show, is that nothing appropriate is outside of its scope. It's a show with an endless curriculum, if you will, if you want to look at it in educational terms, which to that extent, I suppose, makes it somewhat akin to those MOOC thingies. I don't like using that word. I don't like using that acronym anymore. But, the George Siemens stuff in particular, right? The CMOOCs, the sort of choose your own adventure kind of thing. Anyway, dude, there's lots on this episode that's really making me want to blab.
Part of the planning was I'm enjoying going back. Like when I've taught classes before, or when I've just had conversations like this with people before, I can never go back. So I remember a couple of highlights here and there, but I'm going back when I'm out walking my dogs and I'm listening, and the number of times we have said, "Oh, we should go back and cover that again. We should make a note of whatever." So I'm starting to do that.
No, that's awesome. It's a recursive process, and if you are sort of familiar with any instructional design methodologies, primarily ADDIE, people are. I do so many job interviews. I swear I'm not going to start talking about it. But what's your notion of an instructional design process? And it's like, well, there's that ADDIE one, but in truth, it really is just going to be like every place has their own kind of individual process. And I always just feel like that's kind of a bogus question anyway in an interview.
Yeah.
But it's recursive. So any of these approaches, ADDIE or whatever some of these other models are, it's always like you do it, but then you double back to make sure you're doing it properly, make some adjustments, get user feedback, and you keep kind of going back with, and again, there's various iterations of that. So again, I just from a good andragogical standpoint, I like what you're doing, Doug.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. You want to talk about these pictures here or what, man? We got a few. What do we got here? Beverly Clary, lovely, lovely author.
Oh, yeah. Children should learn that reading is pleasure, not just something teachers make you do in school.
Absolutely.
Like, I had a conversation with somebody, and it was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just reading." It's like, "You read?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "You mean all these years I could have just been giving you books for Christmas?" And I'm like, "Yes, you could have."
I'm telling. I'm among a generation of people now where I'm not saying it's like bourgeoisie or like kind of to say that you read for recreation. Like kids my kids' age are just off of that. They're just off of that. My kid, sort of he had to go to a friend's cabin for a week in the summer without internet, and he kind of got through some Stephen King stories, which I was very happy about. But I mean, it's just, again, the notion of literacy itself is changing. So but reading, however you define reading, is in itself something here.
Well, it's an escape. It's you get away from whatever's going on, and you can immerse yourself in a different environment once in a while.
That's right.
The escape is necessary.
Escape is necessary. We're gonna have to come up with a bumper sticker machine. That's what I'm gonna do with the what do you call it? Sandbox. There. That was one other thing. The unused sandbox that we have. So if we ever take a couple of weeks where we actually have like an asynchronous episode, I know it's an asynchronous thing anyway, but where we just like don't necessarily do it the way we normally do. It like sort of something maybe centered around actually exhibits, right, within the sandbox. So that, could be totally something we would do in that context.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So then you got these little stick dudes. Are you doing problems?
Happiness. They make me laugh. They always make me laugh.
That's what this one is, eh? Yeah. Is it like there's just like a group of people who?
It's a strip. Yeah.
Yeah.
They pop out.
Yeah, I've seen these little duties before. They look like the ends of pencils. They look like pencil erasers, actually.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Are you doing math problems for fun? Yeah, I love being mentally challenged. Well, I'm glad you've come to terms with it.
And then it's there.
Touché, little stick dude.
Was that an insult?
Yeah, he's like, he's like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute.
An unepiphany, an anti-epiphany right there.
Yeah.
Totally, man. And we got a word for the podcast.
Yeah, fun is the word of the podcast. I wanted to bring fun in because the more fun you're having, there's a better chance that you're learning. And the question of the podcast is, if anybody out there wants to reach out to us, how can we get more fun into education for everybody? Because we've been talking about students being young or old. We didn't even talk about educators yet. And I want to come back and have let's have the educator conversation, because it'll
be fun part 2. Too fun for everyone.
Yes, that's why I made sure students was in the title, so I can pull that out and put educators in the title, and then we know it's a different thing.
I appreciate your nomenclature here and your general consistency with the approach, man. It makes it easier for me.
Yeah, my goal is to make it easy for everybody, but that's about all I've got.
Well, dope. And pardon my probably more tangential than usual digressions. I like to think that such extemporaneous thinking is a creative attribute, which I bring to the situation. But in any event, apologies if I sort of maybe veered off more than normal. Again, wishing you all the best. Thanks for checking it out. And I suppose that's it for me as well. Take care and bye for now, everybody.
Bye, everybody.